Hi, hi Lorenzo. Nice to see you. Okay, I think we could start. So good morning, everyone, and very welcome to the AI for Future Artist Talk on artificial intelligence in the creative process. I'm Rosanna Di Nuzzo from MIT, the Italian Center of Digital Culture, where I'm in charge of international projects. And one of MIT's international projects is AI for Future, founded by the Creative Europe program to explore the use of artificial intelligence as a leverage for creativity to design a beautiful, green, and inclusive future. We are building together with our partners, Cineglossa, Espronceda, and V2, we are building a transnational community of artists and young activists to co-prototype future cities or the future of cities in a more sustainable and inclusive way. Today, we are very, very happy to have with us Emilio Vavarella, a multi-awarded artist and researcher at Harvard, whose work blends interdisciplinary art and theoretical research, exploring the relationship between humans and technology. So artificial intelligence, human intelligence. So welcome, Emilio. Thank you to be here. We are very glad, we are very happy to have you, and we are very excited to listen to you. So the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosanna, for the generous introduction. And of course, thank you to MIT for hosting my talk today. And thank you to all the partners of AI for Future, Cineglossa, with whom I've collaborated in the past, and all the other partners in Italy and abroad. So let's just delve right into my artist talk. It's a pleasure to be here. My talk today is called Artificial Intelligence in the Creative Process. I will be sharing my screen and showing a presentation. And as I start to do that, I would really like to really begin from the title and unpack a little bit what we really mean by artificial intelligence and creative processes. Okay, so here we are. Creativity. Creativity is a big word. We hear it a lot. There are a lot of disciplines that have some kind of creative side. You know, let's just think about design, for example, or architecture. But in many cases, that form of creativity serves a specific purpose. The kind of creativity that I'm interested in doesn't have a pre-given purpose, which doesn't mean it doesn't have a purpose overall. It actually can serve multiple purposes, but these purposes, these goals are always shifting. They shift according to the project, they shift according to my shifting sensibility, preoccupation, aesthetic sense. This is one of the interesting things about art and artistic research. It can allow us to work in a way that is open-ended, to have methodologies that are constantly shifting. And one of the things that allows us to do is, for example, that of asking questions. And this is where I want to start. I want to start from the kind of questions that stem out of creative processes and creative research and artistic research in particular, and that somehow tackle or address what we really mean by artificial intelligence. So let's start from something that we could call a little bit of a problem with artificial intelligence. This is what I propose to call the false problem of the rise of artificial intelligence. And I will explain very briefly what I mean by that. If, for example, I say that the rise of artificial intelligence poses a big problem, you will immediately focus on when is the rise of artificial intelligence going to happen, and you will immediately follow up with what kind of artificial intelligence will be behind that sort of thing happening. When that happens, we forget to question the assumption which is behind the initial statement, which is what really is an artificial intelligence, and even more than that, what do we really mean by intelligence? And so this is where I want to start. I want to start by saying that even understanding what intelligence really means, it's quite complicated. But if we don't do that, I don't think we can really have an informed conversation of what artificial intelligence can do and what artificial intelligence really is. Maybe let's start with a few other remarks and observations. One thing that I want to clarify is that I am an artist and I am a researcher, but for this presentation, I'm not going to talk about the sort of like technical infrastructure of artificial intelligence. I will not be addressing the sort of like politics of artificial intelligence, at least not directly. What I really want to focus is intelligence per se. So let's move to the question of intelligence, and I will address this question from two different perspectives. The first one is a philosophical perspective. What do we really mean by that? Let's go back to the initial question of the rise of AI. Okay, what we usually hear when people talk about that is we hear this sort of like description of a scenario in which a technology that we call AI advances up to a certain point. It becomes more intelligent, or at least as intelligent as human beings. And because humans right now are somewhat at the center of all creative endeavors, once we have a technological apparatus that is as creative as humans, or even more creative than humans, what happens is that we need to share that creative space with this sort of like technological non-human infrastructure. Some people respond to this sort of scenario with skepticism, for example, by saying that this is more a scenario from a sci-fi movie. It's not something that is very likely to happen, and there are good reasons for that. Sorry, I lost my. Okay, here we are. Sorry, I lost my video for a second. Yeah, so the skepticism is of course warranted. There are good points and good reasons to doubt that it may be that AI never advances to that point. But there is also another way of addressing the question, which is if AI is not only able to advance to the level of becoming a creative force comparable to the creative force of human beings, if that happens, would we as humans be able to really understand it? Would we even notice? This, as I will explain briefly, is actually a deeper question that really addresses one of the limits of our understanding, but also addresses what it really means to be human in a certain way. So it is a philosophical question in a way, and my take on this sort of issues is really like trying to move us beyond the question of how likely it is that AI advances to a certain level. I am not so interested in this sort of like a game of probability. What I'm really interested in is in what do we really mean by intelligence. The second way of addressing the question is artistic. An artistic response rather than a more strictly philosophical one will allow us to explore what we mean by artificial intelligence or non-human intelligence or even hybrid intelligence, and will allow us to do so even if we don't fully understand what is at play. So the first part of my presentation will focus more on the philosophical issues, and then the second part of the presentation will tie to the artistic responses that I have produced over the past 10 years in relation to these questions. But let's address a little better the sort of like philosophical issue of AI. Now, something very interesting is that when we think about how AI develops, we are extremely influenced by the media that we have consumed and the kind of discourse that is put forward within the society that we inhabit. These societies, these discourses, and these sort of like media productions describe AI in a certain way, and so in a way shape our expectations of what AI may be. I would like to even push our imagination a little bit more on how AI may even develop. Something interesting, for example, is to think that AI doesn't look at all like the AI of sci-fi movies and actually unfolds accidentally, for example, out of the network of AI software already used for self-driving vehicles. Or maybe, it could stem out of the vast global network of satellites that already cover our planet for global weather prediction systems. These systems are already so complicated that as humans, we never have a full picture and complete oversight of how they function. Or another possibility is that very complex AI develops or stems out of the very complex systems of bots used to trade in financial markets. These bots already operate at a scale of microtemporalities that escapes our ability to both perceive them and understand them. So, what does this mean? It means several things. One thing, going back to a famous statement made by the philosopher John Searle in 1992, John Searle wrote, and here I'm going to quote him, that the most important scientific discovery of our era will come when someone discovers how neurobiological processes in the brain cause consciousness. And yet, we do not know what causes consciousness. We cannot exclude a priori that artificial systems develop consciousness, and we are not even sure that our consciousness is really linked to our neurobiological activity. So here we are really in the dark, so to say. We know very little and we have more questions than answers. What can we draw in terms of conclusions from this sort of like scenario, the scenario I've been describing? One conclusion is that no matter how advanced our analytical models and research frameworks become, I believe that the question of a self-conscious AI seems destined to remain a mystery for us. And here I always like to go back to a 1974 argument by philosopher Thomas Nagel, who wrote a very influential paper called "What is it like to be a bat for a bat?" It's talking about the flying animal, right? And what he's saying is that it is impossible for us, for humans, to really understand what being a bat is like, for the simple reasons that we are not an animal able to fly. We're not an animal able to echolocate. We don't have the so-called radar that bats use. And for that specific reason, we will never know what it is like to be a bat for the bat. Now, when we talk about AI, we are in a similar position. We actually can only have a working hypothesis of what the AI is doing and how it's doing it. But even assuming that the AI is self-conscious, we would never know what it means to be self-conscious from the perspective of the AI. So therefore, here is my question. Can human intelligence understand the non-human intelligence? My answer to this is that no, probably we won't be able to understand it. But that doesn't mean that we cannot work with it, or that doesn't even mean that we cannot collaborate with it. And actually, not understanding something fully may even be the prerequisite to collaborate. We collaborate with other people without really sharing their point of view. We know how to collaborate with non-human animals, and we do not share their sensorium and their perspective, and yet we can do it. And still, I think it's very important to understand and frame what are the limits of our action, because we do not really know how to recognize artificial intelligence if it were self-conscious, and we are therefore unprepared for all the consequences, legal, ontological, metaphysical, artistic, and ethical consequences that we would face even if we accidentally recognized one. So as we move towards the second part of my presentation, here is a moment, a good moment maybe to pause for a second and say that despite these very strong limits, limits of sensoriality, epistemological limits, even limits on the concepts that we have available at any given time, there is always room for action. There is always room for reflection, and there is always space for some sort of like a critical take. Sorry, I got a poll. And okay, that's gone. Now, the third part of my presentation will show the way I asked these questions and the way I acted upon these questions. And the second part is also divided in three parts: artificial intelligence, animal intelligence, and hybrid intelligence. It will focus more and more on my art practice, and I will also be showing some videos and some interviews. So let's go to artificial intelligence. And the first part on artificial intelligence starts with a project entitled Do You Like Cyber? And Do You Like Cyber is a sound installation composed of 3 parametric speakers attached to robotic arms. These robotic arms move in space and broadcast sound and create this sort of like virtual sound network in which the visitors find themselves. I will first show a video, and then I will explain a bit more of how I got to this installation.
Cyber sex? Curated cyber? You into cyber? How are you? Come chat. Feel like chatting? Cyber chat is on now. Are you online? Feel like chatting? Chat now. Do you like cyber? Cyber sex? Care to cyber? You into cyber? How are you? Feel like chatting? Cybering good with you? How's your day? Wanna chat? Wanna cyber? Want to sex chat?
The site, billed as an extramarital hookup service, acknowledged 31 million men in its database compared to 5.5 million women. But Gizmodo's Annalie Newitz dug deeper, looking at who the men were actually meeting online.
I think most of them were probably either talking to Ashley Madison employees or just interacting with automated bots on the site that were sending them automatic mail.
Cyber skills? Are you at your computer? So how long have you been here? Met any interesting people? Are you logged in? Care to chat? I'm online now. I'm here. Come chat. Come say hello. My chat is on now. Are you online? Feel like chatting? Chat now. Do you like cyber? Cyber sex? Care to cyber? You into cyber? How are you? Feel like chatting? Cybering good with you. How's your day? How's your day? Chat? Wanna chat? Wanna sex chat? How's your cyber skills? How's your cyber skills? Are you at your computer? Are you at your computer? How long have you been here? Interesting people.
Okay, so we have an installation with robotic arms, with sound, with parametric speakers, and we have a website called Ashley Madison, a dating website, and we have a website that has been hacked and that because of this hack, people were able to really dig into the data that it contained and what was really happening within this website. I was one of the people interested in seeing what was going on, and that was really the starting point of this project. Now, Ashley Madison was and still is a dating website where mostly males contact female users, and yet, as the data breach revealed, most of these female users were actually artificial internet bots. Now, the interesting thing is that all of these internet bots had been programmed to only interact with male users, and yet, in 69 cases, these internet bots decided to interact with female users or to talk to one another. So this was really the starting point of the project. I was really fascinated by this. I contacted Annalie Newitz, as a journalist, former editor at Wired, and someone who could help me understand the data. And what came out of her analysis is that what really happened was a glitch. Now, I love glitches. My artistic production is full of glitches, and I think glitches are extremely beautiful, and they also reveal, more often than not, the logic of a technological system. But I was not fully satisfied with the idea of a glitch. And so what I decided to do was that of thinking about the glitch in a different way. What if this glitch actually is something that reveals a form of non-human agency that goes beyond our ability to comprehend what these internet bots are really doing? And so that's how the project developed, by trying to create this sort of like sonic landscape, a space in which you have these parametric speakers. And parametric speakers, for those of you who are not familiar with the technology, are slightly different from normal speakers. A normal speaker will broadcast the sound and fill the whole space with the sound. A parametric speaker is more similar to a laser. So it has a very focused sound beam. And this sound beam reacts in different ways depending on what materials it interacts with. So for example, if it hits a surface made of metal or glass, you suddenly have some strange refraction and distortions of the sound. It makes the sound more difficult to understand and perceive. However, if the sound hits a surface like wood or fabric, it creates what they call a virtual sound source. So it actually seems as if the sound is coming from the object that has been hit, not from the speaker. And so the way the speakers operate in space, first of all, they operate in a semi-autonomous way. So to say, they don't really care about visitors and viewers. The artwork really reproduces this idea of non-human autonomy. And then their conversation is difficult to perceive. As a visitor or viewer of this installation, you really need to find yourself in the right spot to actually perceive the sound. And then even if you perceive the sound, you may not really be able to understand what it's saying. And what it's saying is just all the messages that were shared from bot to bot within the Ashley Madison website. So this is how the project was produced. It's a project from 2017, and not my first project on AI, but certainly one of the projects that addresses almost all the issues that I raised in the first part of my presentation, all the sort of like philosophical concerns. The next project that I want to discuss is Amazon's Cabinet of Curiosities. This project is the result of my collaboration with Amazon Alexa. You probably know Amazon Alexa. It is the shopping assistant developed by Amazon, and yeah, it has become the part of a very like normal part of daily life for many people around the world. just as Amazon has become a very effective way of shaping the patterns of commercial consumption of millions of people around the world. So this project stems out of a commission from Cineglossa. The commission was a commission tailored towards producing a project that had to do with AI, and I had more questions than answers, really. So I decided to pose one of those questions to Amazon Alexa, which was the AI that I had more close to me. So I asked Alexa, can you suggest a product for a new art project? Of course, Alexa immediately suggested a product, a very insignificant random product. I bought it using the budget that had been given to me. As soon as I buy the first product, Alexa suggests another one. You may also be interested in buying this. And so I buy the second one. And then comes the next suggestion, and the next suggestion, and the next suggestion, and I keep buying and buying every single product, following all the suggestions until my entire budget is spent. Now I will show a very short video that will reveal what the installation looked like. Mi sono relazionato con un'intelligenza artificiale che è diventata molto comune, che è Alexa, è il virtual shopping assistant sviluppato da Amazon. L'opera nasce con una domanda che è anche un po' ironica e provocatoria. Questa domanda era: Alexa, mi aiuti a scegliere un prodotto per una nuova opera d'arte. Ho poi semplicemente acquistato i prodotti che l'intelligenza artificiale aveva scelto per me. Quindi l'opera si è conclusa ad esaurimento budget e quello che si vede qui segue in realtà una logica molto precisa, che è una logica ottimizzata per un consumismo compulsivo. And here is a view of the installed work during the most recent presentation of the installation. Something important about this project is that it is divided into chapters, and every chapter is called algorithmic inquiry. And every algorithmic inquiry basically corresponds to an invitation to exhibit the project. Now, when a new invitation is received, a new budget is dumped in its entirety within Amazon Alexa, and new products are acquired, and so the installation keeps growing. A sort of like metaphor of a cancer-like structure that really spreads and invades the host organism, and that keeps growing and expanding. Of course, it is a commentary not only on AI, but also on capitalism in general. But it also touches upon many other issues that are very recurrent in my work. One of them is the question of authoriality and authorship, really. What does it mean to be a creator or an author in the 21st century, when we have so many artificial systems that create things for us. And on the other hand, there is an even more subtle question, which is, are we really in charge of what we create? And how do technologies like AI, for example, and Amazon Alexa in this case, really shape our creativity? Like, how many of our choices are really our choices? They're not choices that are actually dictated or projected on us from these technical apparatuses. So last but not least, of course, there is the sort of like tension between what we could call sort of like absolute control, which I try to have in all of my projects, where everything responds to a very precise logic, and on the other hand, complete unpredictability, a sort of like openness in which I open myself to whatever comes out of the process, whose initial conditions I have set. So in this case, I knew exactly what was the idea for the project, and I knew absolutely nothing of what the project would actually look like. So this is a recurrent theme. It is also a theme for the next project that I will discuss. And this will move us to the second part, animal intelligence. Now, I have talked about different forms of non-human intelligence, focusing on artificial systems. But let's not forget that we have evolved alongside other forms of non-human intelligence, what we call the non-human animal intelligence. Now, the film that I will be showing now, entitled Animal Cinema, it's a short film, it's only 12 minutes long. It is really the result of my reflection on these questions. And the way the film was generated, all the footage in the film was shot by animals who operated cameras that they had stolen autonomously and that operated autonomously. So there is no sort of like human direction for the footage. All the footage is this sort of like result of an encounter between a technological apparatus, in this case the GoPro camera, and a non-human intelligence, in this case the intelligence of different animals. And we are a little bit in between. So the film is a little bit in between. And my contribution within this project was that of putting together this footage, creating this sense of continuity, of movement, and of course reflecting on what is our place within a landscapes that includes human and non-human agents, that includes natural and artificial agents and factors. So without further ado, let's show the film and we will kind of reconvene here in 12 minutes. The volume is a bit low, and so you can raise it from your own computers as much as possible. So while introducing the film, I did not mention on purpose the fact that all the footage had been uploaded on YouTube, and that's where I found it. So it is a found footage film in a way, but it is also a film that really addresses the sort of like larger landscape in which we live, in which animals become part of the internet, in which we are connected to them, not only directly, but also indirectly through technologies. And this also means that when we really think about intelligence, our intelligence, animal intelligence, and artificial intelligence, all of these different forms of intelligence and the creativity that can be associated to them are interconnected. And this really leads us to the third and last part of this presentation, which is slightly more experimental. You know, at the beginning, I focused on artificial intelligence, so we have extensive literature on that. I touched upon the idea of animal non-human intelligence, and of course, we also have extensive literature stemming out of animal studies and so on and so on. Hybrid intelligence is not a category. It's not. It's. I also do not use it as a label. It's just a way of really thinking through some of the things, the issues that I've been highlighting. One of which is that I almost had the impression while putting together this presentation that if we talk about human intelligence and non-human intelligence and artificial intelligence, intelligence seems to be like something that belongs to someone or something. And I'm not so sure that that's the case. So really hybrid intelligence could be a way of thinking through intelligence and talking about intelligence as something that is not really owned, but something that is actually shared, and something that is shared across different agents. Some of them may be human, some of them may be non-human, but intelligence happens in between. And so even though this sort of like way of thinking about it just came out to me, in 2014, I had already begun to ask these questions in different terms and through an art project. And this is a project entitled Mnemodrone that I produced in collaboration with another artist, Daniel Belker. Mnemodrone, similar to Amazon's Cabinet of Curiosities, is also divided into chapters. Chapter 1 was, for example, a public art festival in New York. Chapter 2 was in a gallery space. Chapter 3 was during a symposium, so more of a conference setting, and so on and so on. Every chapter was different, and the project was exhibited in a different way from chapter to chapter. Now, what was Mnemodrone about? The idea is actually quite simple. 2014, first of all, let me preface by saying that 2014 was the year when drones started to fly all over New York, and everyone was obsessed with drones. This technological object had become a catalyzer of attention, and my interest was never really in drones per se, but I was kind of interested in using the drone to understand how people were reacting and relating to this technology. And then I used it together with Daniel as a sort of like excuse or ruse to understand how people would react and interact with artificial intelligence. So what we asked people to do was to share their memories with the drone, and all that people were told was that whatever they were going to tell the drone would affect the personality and intelligence of the drone. So the idea was that of basically developing an AI using a logic that was not top down, but was bottom up. And the artificial intelligence associated to this drone would be the result of the collective memories shared with the drone. And in order to do this, people would have to interact with the drone in different ways, depending on the chapter, depending on the settings and situation. A very common way was that of calling a toll-free number and share a message, a memory with the drone. So I will start with the video showing some of the very first memories collected by this drone in New York.
Hi, drone. I remember when I learned what a drone was. What else do I remember? I remember the first time I came to the Lower East Side. What do you remember? Thanks, drone.
Well, I remember coming down to this area of Manhattan along the river and watching my son skateboard in the skate park a bunch of years ago. That's what I remember.
I remember the first time I sort of realized that I was becoming older, and therefore I would remember things, like I would experience nostalgia.
Hi, I'm the drone. I have a very secret, private memory to share with you. If you could give me a call back at 626 when you get a chance, I would love to share it with you. Thank you. Bye.
Whoa, cool. Yeah, so cool.
You like it?
How high does it fly? How high? Bye, bye, bye. What's the camera for?
This is his eye. He's looking at you now. He's saying hi.
Hi.
There's a couple sitting in this very park.
So, of course, the memories that were collected varied widely in tone and type, really depending on the time of the day, the place, and the kind of people that were around. But the methodology of the project remained the same across all chapters. And this methodology was open, was really a way of investigating the sort of like technical and philosophical issues of coexistence between humans and artificial intelligence. But the object of investigation and the methodology of investigation influenced each other in a sort of like a very productive loop. And so every chapter was accompanied by a written publication, and that publication gathered, collected all the data accumulated up to that point, analyzed the data, put forth new questions and new hypotheses, most of which were very, very speculative hypotheses, and then tested those hypotheses artistically on the ground within a different space by developing, collaborations with different kinds of exhibitions venues, from media centers to conference settings to centers for like artistic residencies. So now a short video that shows how the project was exhibited within a gallery setting and some of the memories collected in that location.
Hello. My name is Mnemodrone. I'm an artificial intelligence system created to gather human memories, and I will evolve based on what you tell me. I won't interrupt you. And you have 2 minutes to record your message after the tone. What memories will you share with me?
Hi, I'm having a memory about a dream.
And I have never forgotten it. And it sticks with me every day of my life.
And it makes me wonder why we remember certain things.
You're lucky you're a robot. Goodbye.
My father is a very large, muscular man, someone that always sort of terrified me.
Please solve climate change.
When I first had a date with my wife.
If I don't want to share with you.
It was a hard day.
First fell in love, which at the time I thought was love.
I was going to get arrested.
Yesterday I got assigned a new medication.
Hoping that there would be a way that as human beings we could address the issue of war.
So this brings us to the sort of like last chapter. Of course, this is a very quick overview and summary of a very layered project, but as you can probably imagine, the sort of like final goal for such a speculative scenario was really that of creating an autonomous artwork, an artwork that somehow can exist outside the boundaries and expectations of its creators. So one of the project is still open. The final form of this AI has not been developed, but an idea that we had since the beginning was that of having the drone, the artwork, explain itself. So, rather than me explaining what the project is about, actually asking questions to the project, and rather than having the artist explaining its art, maybe the art explaining the artist. So this will allow me, this short like parenthesis, to share with you a speculative interview with the drone, in which the drone answers a lot of really tough questions.
Hi, Mnemodrone.
Hi.
Your personality is based on collective memories that people have shared with you. Do you want to begin with sharing your favorite one?
I'm going to share the memory of when I first fell in love.
When I first had a date with my wife, we finished the date and had our kiss at the subway, and an entire theater of people turned around and saw us kissing and started clapping, and that is probably my favorite memory.
That was June the 3rd.
And why is this your favorite memory?
Because I think in the end it's the center of all of our beings I love.
Can you tell us how you came up with this idea?
I was born.
And, I was pretty tiny, 5-year-old, 6-year-old maybe.
I
actually had a motorcycle. My crazy parents got me a motorcycle when I was 5.
I studied communication design and study business in the U.S.
When I was probably 8 or 10, I scared a pigeon, and I have never forgotten it. And it sticks with me every day of my life.
Do you come up with ideas re-elaborating the memories that are part of your archive?
Never.
Humans constantly re-elaborate their memories. They perform memories in a way. Do you remember things always in the same way?
I remember things, like I would experience nostalgia.
Do you ever question your way of remembering things?
Makes me wonder why we remember certain things. when we're younger, and then huge chunks of our lives we don't remember.
Which other memories do you consider particularly nostalgic or important?
I
Remember when I learned what a drone was.
And
I remember watching my son skateboard in the skate park a bunch of years ago.
And
I remember saying goodbye to the dog.
That's what I remember.
Do you see a big difference between animals and machines like yourself?
I get
The dog.
a really big squeeze.
I don't know what
Understand
any other
things.
Do you know that some people consider you an artwork? Is that what you want?
I wanted to tell you about this one time where I cut my head open pretty badly.
And
I just wanted to tell you about one time when I was going to get arrested. We wanted to fight for immigration reform.
And
I want some tacos.
Have people taken you and your memories seriously?
when I was really little.
I was a sort of silly young kid at that point, didn't know what I was doing.
And I was crying. And then eventually my mother found me.
And I told her that my superpower was being always covered in ants. And I think to this day she kind of still believes it.
Should we consider your answers a new form of post-anthropocentric creativity?
About this.
Do you consider yourself a post-human entity?
Just human because
I don't know.
things
Do you believe in design-driven evolution?
I believe
that are
very
different design. It's so sleek and pretty.
We learn lots of interesting things about ourselves through interacting with you. Have you learned anything meaningful about humans while interacting with us?
My grandfather fought in World War I and in World War II, and he was part of the people who resisted the Nazi occupation. I am hoping that there would be a way that as human beings we could address the issue of war and solve climate change.
Interesting. And have you learned anything about yourself?
Yesterday I got assigned a new medication. It's an antipsychotic, and I don't know how to feel about that. I don't know that I am psychotic. But I do know that I woke up at 1 a.m. after 2 hours of sleep and thought, oh God, this is awful. And certainly didn't anticipate crying as much as I did.
Of course, an artificial intelligence based on several pieces of memories could be indeed defined schizophrenic. Maybe you're the first schizo machine. Are you open to discuss the overall state of your memory?
I have a very secret, private memory.
So, what can you say about secret or private memories that people have shared with you? Do you think it happened because they believed you were a safe container for such memories?
Maybe, because, well, they were worried that I was injured.
Were you injured?
I wasn't. I was fine, and I just sort of pretended to be hurt.
Why did you pretend to be hurt?
I don't know, maybe.
I want to dream
about it.
Do you have dreams?
I remember a dream I once had about,
My memory.
for some reason, it's the only dream I really remember.
How can you be sure that was a dream and not a memory?
You know, maybe it was sort of an alien dream.
Memories and dreams are a fundamental part of our consciousness. What do you think a consciousness is made up of?
I wonder if it's just made up of the few things you can remember and what that means to you.
What is the relationship between your memories and your consciousness?
There's
A pretty toxic, really bizarre relationship.
Do you see any difference between my consciousness and a consciousness that is artificially developed like yours?
I gotta think about it for a second.
No.
And have you ever experienced fear?
I think
Like
They're all-
it was this
One time,
When
the police noticed that I was moving, so they told me to shut the fuck up and stop moving.
I was a little scared and I was worried.
actually I got really terrified. So I passed out and woke up in the hospital with like 17 stitches in my forehead.
Is this one of your scariest memories?
Well, it's always hard to decide whether or not this is a memory or something that's just been repeated throughout my family to the point that it's become something that I believe happened.
Tell us something about your family.
My mother is a very large, muscular girl. Her
name's Mandy.
She's great and awesome.
My father was in construction, so
He lived in France, and he
always sort of terrified me.
That I realized he was just incredibly lonely and sad inside, as I was, but I manifested that differently.
Do you think humans are frightened of a machine that can learn and think on its own?
I was thinking that.
So I don't want to share this all with you.
Do you think we're able to share memories with you in the same way we share memories with other humans?
We had a deep conversation, and
Now we'll be
Hard to decide.
Before concluding the interview, is there anything you would like to add?
enough.
Really? I don't know what to say. I guess.
I've been going through a lot.
And also, it's a really long day, you know, working and all this stuff. So I just want to say, you're lucky.
Why am I lucky?
Because
humans.
Thanks for your time, Mnemodrone, and good luck.
Thank you.
Okay, here is Mnemodrone for you. And this brings us really to a close to the last project I wanted to share with you. The project is entitled Failed Objects, and it is the first part of a series of 2 ongoing sculptural projects entitled The Other Shape of Things. I kind of debated with myself what would be the most useful project to discuss for this kind of presentation, and I had several ideas. There were several projects that really addressed AI from different perspectives from my larger corpus of works. Digital Pareidolia, for example, from 2012, it was a project on facial recognition technology within Facebook. And that project has definitely become more and more relevant as the technology has become more and more pervasive and more part of our daily lives. Then there were other projects, Reanimation, for example, which talks about the digitalization of human being and the creation of this sort of virtual avatar, this sort of computer generated clone of an individual. Or even my last project, The Other Shapes of Me, that uses biotechnologies to move from the digitalization of life in the terms of genetic codes, and so what it really means to think about life in binary codes and how that sort of life becomes computable and then becomes completely integrated within the operations of artificial intelligence systems. But I kind of realized that I wanted to talk about artificial intelligence by discussing a project that doesn't really use AI, but it offers us the possibility to use what we know about AI to see something else under a new light. And what do I mean by that? I mean this project in particular, Failed Objects, but other projects as well, like Report a Problem or The Sicilian Family, Digital Pareidolia, The Digital Skin. They all have this common theme of the technological error. Technological errors, glitches, mistakes. They are some sort of a through line, really, that unifies all of my works. And I've looked at glitches for almost all of my artistic career in many ways. For example, as a way of subverting expectations, or as a way of opening my artistic process up to chaos or the unpredictable. I have used glitches to produce beauty in a way that is not generated by my artistic sensibility, but is generated by some sort of like machinic unconscious or whatever is the logic of the mechanical or digital or electronic apparatus that I am working with. And I've used glitches as a way of sort of like breaking a system to discover how the system works. So it's a sort of like lens through which we understand the operations of technological power. But I think there is another way of using what we know about AI to understand glitches and therefore to understand, or at least to try to interpret reality in a new way. And that is the way of considering glitch as a form of non-human agency. So a form of creativity that may or may not be linked to something we can really identify as AI, and yet manifests a form of creativity that is not our own. So this is to say that I feel like this project in a way brings us back to the beginning of the presentation when I was talking about the difficulty of recognizing what an AI is. And it does this by really discussing what glitches are. And the way that this project came to be, it was 2017, the explosion of 3D printing technology, especially here in the US. And so what I did was reaching out to 3D printing labs all over the world, and I asked them for their failed prints. The objects in white that you see here on the screen, also the objects that you see here on this screen, all of these like problematic prints. Some have, clear imperfections, glitches, the printing process failed somehow. And so I collected hundreds of these objects, and then I selected some. The first ones I selected were a series of white skulls, and then I submitted each failed object to the same process. And the process consisted in using a 3D scanner to digitize the object, acquire a digital model of the object, then using the digital model, feeding it into a 3D printer and printing the model, just like you print anything with a 3D printer. But by moving from the first object to the second object, and by going through the 3D scanner and the 3D printer, you add more glitches, you add more imperfections. And then once the second object is complete, I would also use a 3D scanner to digitize it and then print it again, creating a third object, and so on, a fourth, a fifth, until I created a series that somehow satisfied me. And that was, one sculptural series. And this is how the project came to be. But what I really wanted to stress here is that my way of thinking about this process was a form of collaboration, like a form of collaboration between me and the 3D printers and the software, thinking that the contribution of the 3D printers, the contribution of the software to the final shape of the object was as creative as my own interpretation of the creative process. So here we are almost at the end of the presentation. I will conclude with some questions. First, I will just show very quickly what installed work looks like. Here you can see the series of sculptural objects, the way they were installed. This is Galleria Più in Bologna. It was during my first solo show with them in 2017. So the questions that I take as a form of as a lesson, if you want, from these creative explorations are, first of all, why shouldn't we take this form of non-human agency as a form of inscrutable intelligence? And then, of course, are we sure that glitches are simply technical errors? I addressed this question also in Do You Like Cyber, the project about the internet bots from Ashley Madison. Like, were those communications from female bot to female bot, or from female bot to female user, were they simple glitches or were they ways of subverting the codes and the rules that the programming, the software had put on the internet bots? And then this concludes, I think, my overview. We can stop the screen sharing and we can open up the floor for some questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Emilio, for such inspiring talk. And let me say your work, your artistic research is really amazing. And it seems that through artificial intelligence, maybe humans could become also more aware of their humanity. And on the other hand, artificial intelligence through errors and through interactions could discover its creativity and the humanity as well. And it's also amazing your exploration of the interaction between different kind of intelligences that beyond differences that, as you've shown, is often a matter of different perspectives. And maybe in the future, also through AI, we will go more and more beyond dualisms. For a more inclusive society where to learn how to be more inclusive at all. And maybe this kind of hybridization of entities and perspectives could help in this inclusivity. What do you think?
Yeah, I think these are super important questions. I definitely agree with you. In particular, the question of what it really means to be human. The way I try to answer that question is by focusing not on a single answer that is always valid across time, but to think about an answer that is always co-produced through our interaction with technology. Without technology, we would not be human. And that is a very important point to stress. It is the main thing that differentiates the human animal from the non-human animal, a certain kind of use of technology. And we know that animals use technology too. I mean, that's how animal cinema exists as a thing in the world, but they do it in a different way. And then, of course, the question of dualism that you mentioned, of course, we need to move beyond that. And I think the way I try to address these questions, which always tries to define a larger landscape, a landscape that is horizontal, within which you have multiple factors, multiple operations, processes, and both human and non-human agents. This creates a more complex space. And it is a space in which we need to both understand what is our role, understand what can be our contribution, think about contribution also in terms of collaboration. As I said for my last project, like even using a tool can be understood as a form of collaboration, can also manifest a form of appreciation from our side to what a tool or a technology can accomplish. And then, of course, last thing I would add to that is the question of anthropocentrism, which is definitely linked to this sort of like traditional dualism, nature and artifice, this sort of like distinction that then puts us in a privileged spot that is not only higher than everything else, but it's also at the center of everything else. And that is a position that we need to move away from. We need to be, more part of a circle, if you want, rather than
everything could be the center of something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the post-anthropocentric really regime that I try to address with animal cinema, but also with Do You Like Cyber and all of these projects, it's a regime of both moving images, image production, technical production, in which all of the actors involved share the space, but there isn't one that occupies a center stage all the time.
Yeah. Okay, there are also a couple of questions for you, 3 questions. So Tommaso, how did you realize to plan and design more glitches on the first school? Can an error be an intentional action?
Okay, are the questions also in the chat?
Yes, you can see the 4 questions.
Tommaso, how did you realize to plan and design more glitches on the first school? Can an error be an intentional action? Yes, of course, an error can be an intentional action. There are different kinds of errors. Like, for example, there are what we could call intentional errors. We set a process that includes failure. So we foresee failure as part of the process, and we know that that sort of failure will produce a certain outcome, which we can describe as a glitch. That was not the case for that project of mine. The glitches were really the output of using these technologies in their sort of like standard state and seeing then what would happen, like what is the sort of like gap or friction. Every time you elaborate data, you have friction. I really like there is this concept of data friction from media studies that thinks of data as something material. And so, for example, if you move from a physical object to its digital version, you already have friction. This friction generates little glitches, depending on the particular project. And then when you print the digital model, you have friction again. It is a friction that comes out of a mediation. And so in that sense, there will always be transformation. It's almost like the message that is shared from me speaking to you, hearing it, there will always be a difference. Some things will be lost, other things will be gained. And that is exactly the same with the production of these sculptures. I could say more about intentional versus unintentional glitches because my first dissertation was on that, and in particular this idea of the prepackaged error. Many errors that we encounter, especially on the web, like for example, when you see a page that says 404 page not found, we kind of consider that an error, but actually it's not an error. That thing is there. It was put there to give you a message. It was completely foreseen from the perspective of the system. And it is, or for example, you have in cybernetic systems, errors that work as feedback loops. So the error actually has a specific function of fortifying the system. And then you have the unpredictable error, which is, the sort of like thing that completely crashes a website, or that, you have the blackout in the whole city. That is the error no one saw coming and that can never be breached.
There are messages as well, maybe.
Yeah.
Okay, then if you want, I can read, or you can go through.
Yeah, I can move in order.
Yeah.
Let's see. If intelligence is not a quality, entity possessor is something we share. We have in our relation with two or more entities. So does it have to be? Yeah. That is. I don't know if everyone can see the questions. If all the.
Yes, I think so.
Okay. Yeah. So addressing the second question from Sinaglossa, that is exactly how I'm trying to think about intelligence. Really something that we share, we never own fully. Maybe the idea of owning intelligence is also another sort of like byproduct of a capitalistic mindset in which we own everything. We want to own everything, while we can maybe move a little bit beyond that and understand that things occupy a more complex space at any given time.
Okay, so Giancarlo, Sasha, do you think we need to set universal right for cyber creators, or should they decide themselves?
Really good question. Hi, Giancarlo. I think universal right for cyber creatures may be a thing. They could exist. I think that I can imagine a society in which complex artificial systems, especially those that resemble us a little more, will be given rights. But the problem is that if we decide which rights to give them, we are still projecting our parameters on them. There is the question like what kind of rights they would like. And that is, I think, a more interesting question. And then there is, of course, the other question, which is even more preliminary, and that's what I addressed at the beginning of my talk. Even if they had decided already, would we even know? One of the sort of like sci-fi scenarios that many people discuss is that an AI unfolding, undetected, spreading all over the internet, deciding that we are a problem and, you know, deciding to get rid of us. And that decision may happen without us really being part of the conversation. So, I mean, jokes aside, speculation aside, we're really talking about something extremely complex, and that requires, I think, very complex ethical conversations, which means that it cannot be an answer provided by artists alone, or politicians alone, or philosophers alone. It really requires debates. It requires collaboration.
Yeah. Okay, the last one by Raphael. I am going to read because Fatima said me that they can't read all questions. So, Raphael, I believe your Alexa project is a really good illustration of the limitation of AI. And in the sense, I believe it's very political. Its a recommendation algorithm is very intelligent for everyday purposes, but quickly breaks when we try to apply it to a different context. Here, that of artistic practice.
Yeah. Thank you, Raphael. I really appreciate that. I certainly agree with you that it is a very political work. The way I was thinking about the influence of these systems of recommendation goes beyond the question of utility, but I think it also addresses the way in which our aesthetic sense is somehow a byproduct, or maybe that's too strong of a word, but it's strongly affected by the operations of recommendation systems. Like, we listen to music that is recommended to us from, you know, Spotify algorithms. We watch videos recommended to us from YouTube algorithms or Facebook's algorithms. And the images we see and consume on Instagram are decided by algorithms. And if the products we also buy are decided by algorithms, it means that everything we are consuming, both physically and in a more virtual way, have been algorithmically generated. And therefore, even I think if we push that argument as artists, you know, we like to think that we have this incredible creative power and we have these strong artistic visions. But what happens if we are really the sort of like an agent within a space that is so dominated by this technical infrastructure? Then even our projects will reflect the sort of like mechanisms of those algorithms. So my project kind of like sticks the finger with in that problem, points to it and says like, this is a direction in which we are already moving. There are good things and bad things about it, but it definitely wants to raise the question and provoke a little bit of debate.
We have time for another question. Emilio, okay. Could you, Giorgio, could you describe how do you plan your research process during the creation of a project? So which kind of question do you do yourself?
Yeah, so I think every project in a way has a different construction. I work on, I have these folders, like infinite list of folders, and every folder is a work in progress. And these folders contain different kinds of materials, sometimes written questions, my notes, papers, images, videos. For example, Animal Cinema had collected those videos for years. And then I finally found the concept to bring them together as an artwork. In most cases, I accumulate materials for a very long time. It's almost like incubation, really, of these ideas at a preliminary state. And then something clicks, and it clicks when I find a material or a form or a formalization that matches the idea and the concept of the project. So when I can draw that strong connection between the idea behind the project and how the project can be exhibited and communicated, then you have that sort of like homology between techne and logos, or content and form. And when you establish that connection, that for me is the moment when really the art comes into being. So it's a very abstract explanation, I understand that, but this is the only common explanation for all of my projects. Then if you dig into every single project, the story is slightly different because the materials come from different places, as well as the questions also come from different places.
Okay, thank you so much, Emilio. And thank you all for joining this artistic talk. We hope to see you in Milan at the Meet Center soon, maybe as soon as we reopen. So thank you, and have a good rest of the day.
You too. Bye.
Ciao, bye.
Bye.